In the 8th century, an argument erupts that will fracture Islamic theology for the next 1,000 years. The question isn't whether God exists or what Muhammad taught. The question is simpler, more dangerous. Can angels sin? Abu Mashar al-Balkhi says no. Al-Balkhi. Angels are pure intellect, ministers without bodies, incapable of straying. But the Quran itself contradicts him. Surah 2:102 describes two angels in Babylon, Harut and Marut, teaching sorcery to humans, trapped between earth and heaven, eternally warning seekers. We are only a trial. Do not disbelieve. If angels can't sin, what are they doing in a well in Babylon, teaching magic, unable to go home? This isn't the story you know. Harut and Marut aren't rebels like Lucifer, claiming God's throne. There's something stranger. Angels who complained that humans were too wicked, who insisted they could do better, who took God's challenge and lost so catastrophically they're still paying for it. Their names echo across 3 religions. Their origins blur between Persia and Babylon, and every attempt to explain them rewrites what an angel can be. The story begins before they fall, before they have names. In the Quranic account, when God announces his intention to create Adam, the angels respond with what sounds like confusion, but reads like contempt. Will you place upon the earth one who causes corruption and sheds blood? They ask. While we glorify your praise and sanctify you, it's not a question. It's a comparison. We're better. We don't murder. We don't lie. Why would you create something inferior when you already have us? God's response is cryptic. I know what you do not know. Most Islamic commentators place what happens next after Adam's creation, after humanity has already begun its long demonstration of weakness. But a minority, Al-Kisai among them, links the fall of Harut and Marut directly to this moment. These angels don't just question God's wisdom. They stake their entire claim to superiority on a bet they don't realize they're making. The angels observe humanity from their vantage point in the celestial realm. They watch murders, lies, idolatry. The catalog of human failure stretches across generations. And in their observation, something hardens. Not rebellion, that would be too Luciferian, too proud. This is something colder. The angels discuss among themselves. If we were down there, embodied, tempted, we would remain pure. Humanity's wickedness isn't about circumstance. It's about essence. God hears this. And God offers them a chance to prove it. Choose 2 among you, the accounts say. Send them to earth with bodies, with desires, with the same constraints humans face. Let's see how they perform. The angels choose their champions carefully. Harut and Marut, the names themselves are strange, foreign to Arabic, echoing the Avestan language of pre-Islamic Persia. Harvatat and Amaratat were Zoroastrian Ameshaspentas, divine emanations representing wholeness and immortality, flowing beings of cosmic abundance. When these names migrate into Arabic tradition, they carry that weight but twist into something darker. Wholeness becomes testing, immortality becomes eternal punishment. The 2 angels descend, and everything changes immediately. Tabari's 9th century chronicle narrates what happens next with the detail of someone reporting a crime scene. The angels, now embodied, meet a woman named Zuhara. In some accounts, she's simply beautiful. In others, she's Venus herself, the planet personified, divinity wrapped in flesh, the kind of being that makes the boundary between celestial and earthly collapse. She looks at them. They look back. And something they've never experienced before ignites. Desire. Zuhara tells them she'll be intimate with them under conditions. First, worship her idol. The angels refuse immediately. They came to prove their superiority to humans, committing shirk, the sin of idolatry, the one unforgivable transgression in Islamic theology, would obliterate the entire experiment. They remain righteous. For now, they encounter her again. This time her condition is different. Drink wine with me. Just wine. The angels confer. Alcohol isn't shirk. It's forbidden, yes, but it's not the complete rejection of God. Compared to idolatry, it seems manageable. They drink. The wine courses through their newly embodied forms. Whatever mechanisms kept them aligned to divine will, pure intellect, lack of appetite, angelic nature itself, dissolve in alcohol's chemical burn. Inhibitions they didn't know they had vanish. Zuhara approaches again. This time, they don't refuse. In the midst of their intimacy, someone sees them. A witness. In their drunken panic, Harut and Marut commit the crime that seals everything. They kill the witness. The next morning arrives with the weight of awareness. Harut and Marut wake to the full horror of what they've done. They've committed 3 sins in one night: intoxication, fornication, murder. They try to return to heaven, to ascend back to the realm they came from, to resume their existence as pure beings of light and obedience. They can't. The connection is severed. Their angelic link, whatever metaphysical tether bound them to the celestial realm, snapped when the witness's blood hit the ground. God speaks to them one final time, offering a choice that's really a cruel mercy. Your punishment can be in this world or the next. Choose. Harut and Marut choose earth. Better finite suffering they can see than eternal torment they can only imagine. God grants their wish, but adds a condition that transforms punishment into pedagogy. They will remain in Babylon, in a well, teaching humans the very knowledge that led to their damnation: magic, sorcery, the manipulation of reality through supernatural means. But they must warn every seeker who comes, we are only a trial. Do not disbelieve. They hang there still, upside down in some accounts, eternally teaching and eternally warning, proof that even angels couldn't survive the test they designed for humans. But wait. The story fractures almost immediately. Hassan al-Basri, a contemporary of the early Islamic community, looks at Surah 2:102 and sees different words. Not Malakayan, 2 angels, but Malakayan, 2 kings. A single dot changes everything. In his reading, Harut and Marut aren't celestial beings at all. They're human kings in Babylon who learned sorcery from devils and taught it to others. No angelic fall. No divine experiment. Just human wickedness operating at scale. Ibn Abbas, a cousin of Muhammad and renowned interpreter, offers another reading. The word ma doesn't mean what, but not. So the verse becomes, the devils taught sorcery, and not what was sent to the 2 angels Harut and Marut. In this version, the angels taught lawful magic, protective spells, beneficial knowledge, while devils corrupted it into harmful sorcery. Harut and Marut remain righteous. The sin belongs entirely to demons and the humans who chose to learn from them. Tabari, the great 9th century chronicler, takes yet another path. He argues Ma refers to the angels Gabriel and Michael, not Harut and Marut at all. The 2 figures in Babylon are just men. The angel connection is a grammatical misreading, 3 interpretations, 3 completely different stories, and underneath all of them, a single burning question. What happens when the Quran describes angels doing something angels shouldn't be able to do? The philosopher theologians can't accept it. Abu Mashar al-Balkhi, drawing on Jewish angelology, constructs an airtight case. Angels are pure intellect. They lack bodies. They have no appetites. They can't desire because desire requires a physical form that wants something it doesn't have. Angels, being complete in their nature, want nothing except to serve God. Therefore, angels cannot sin. Therefore, the story must mean something else. Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, the great 12th century polymath, elevates this to doctrine. Angelic impeccability becomes one of the 6 articles of faith. To believe angels can sin is to misunderstand their nature entirely. Razi dismisses the tale of Harut and Marut as fabrication, likely inserted by Ka'b al-Ahbar, a Jewish convert whose narratives drew too heavily on non-Islamic sources, but the Orthodox theologians, Asherites, Maturides, push back. Angels aren't automatically sinless in their framework. They're obedient by nature, yes, but obedience without the capacity for disobedience isn't virtue. It's programming. The test only means something if failure is possible. Harut and Marut prove that angels can fall, not through pride like Iblis, but through weakness, through the same appetites that plague humans. The compromise position emerges in the work of Mujahid ibn Jabr and ibn Kathir. Harut and Marut sinned in their hearts, not their flesh. Since angels lack true physical bodies, their drinking and intimacy happened on some other plane, spiritual desire without physical consummation, the shadow of sin without its material reality. This lets the story stand while protecting angelic nature. The fall becomes metaphysical, a corruption of will rather than deed. Watch what happens to Zuhara, Venus, across this debate. In early manuscripts, she's central. She's the catalyst, the figure who embodies temptation made flesh. Persian and Turkish Islamic art from the medieval period depicts her clearly, a woman of devastating beauty, sometimes crowned, sometimes with planetary symbols hovering around her. By the time Rashid Rida and Muhammad Abduh arrive in the 20th century, she's gone. Modernist Salafi scholars scrub her entirely from their commentaries. Some reduce her to an idol, a golden statue the angels refuse to worship. Others make her a metaphor for stellar worship, star-gazing superstition. The erasure is surgical and deliberate. As Islam modernizes, as it pushes back against European Orientalist accusations of superstition and mythology, Zuhara becomes an embarrassment. A planetary deity seducing angels, too Persian, too mystical, too susceptible to claims that Islam borrowed from Zoroastrianism. Because here's what no one can fully escape. The names Harut and Marut don't come from Semitic languages. Harvatat and Ameratat were Zoroastrian entities long before the Quran. Georges Dumézil traced similar stories to the Mahabharata. The Jewish Book of Watchers describes angels falling through lust for human women. Second Temple Judaism was already wrestling with these narratives when Islam emerged. And yet, and this matters, the Quranic version does something none of the others do. The Jewish Watchers rebel. They descend without permission, marry human women, teach forbidden knowledge, and corrupt the earth until God sends the flood. It's a story about transgression and divine punishment, about angels overstepping bounds. The Christian fallen angels follow Lucifer in metaphysical revolt. They claim God's throne. They reject his authority. They set up rival kingdoms in hell. It's cosmic civil war. Harut and Marut do neither. They descend with permission. God sends them. Their crime isn't rebellion but failure. Failure to meet the standard they themselves claimed humans should meet. The story isn't about angelic pride, but angelic humility learned the hardest way. It's not, humans are so wicked, it's being human is so hard. This is why Rumi, the 13th century mystic poet, keeps returning to them in the Masnavi. He uses Harut and Marut as a mirror for spiritual seekers who judge others. Remember the tale of Harut and Marut, he writes, who looked upon Adam's children with scorn, who declared themselves superior and found themselves hanging in darkness, teaching the very knowledge that damned them. His warning cuts. Every time you judge another's sin, you're making the angels bet. Every time you say, I would never, you're volunteering for their test. Ibn Arabi takes it further into metaphysical territory. In his reading, the Satans who teach sorcery are forces that veil the soul from divine light through illusion. Harut and Marut represent the theoretical and practical intellect descending toward the heart. Their magic, the ability to separate husband and wife, means severing the heart from the soul, breaking the marriage of body and spirit. They hang upside down because the intellect, when disconnected from its source, inverts. It becomes clever without being wise, knowledgeable without being enlightened. The sorcery they teach isn't spells. It's the fundamental illusion that you can affect the world through your own power, forgetting that only God ultimately moves anything. This is why they must warn every seeker, because the knowledge itself is true, but using it without acknowledging its source is the real sorcery, the real separation. Modern Muslims increasingly side with the philosophers. In the age of scientific rationalism, the literal tale, drunk angels murdering witnesses, reads like mythology, the kind of thing that makes Islam look primitive to Western eyes. The reinterpretations multiply. Harut and Marut were human kings. The verse is mistranslated. The story comes from Israelite sources and shouldn't be taken seriously. Venus was never part of the original narrative. But something's lost in this retreat. The original story contains a profound psychological truth. The people most convinced of their virtue are the ones most vulnerable to spectacular falls. The angels didn't fail because they were wicked. They failed because they couldn't imagine themselves failing. Their certainty about their superiority was the trapdoor that opened beneath them. John C. Reeves, studying the manuscript traditions, discovered something fascinating. Medieval Jewish texts like Midrash Abkir tell versions of the Harut and Marut story, but they post-date the Islamic versions. The influence went backward. Islam reshaped Jewish mysticism, not the other way around. Patricia Crone's research confirms this. Rabbinic Judaism rejected fallen angel stories as dangerous and unauthentic, but mystical Jewish sects absorbed them from Islamic sources. The story was so compelling, it jumped religious boundaries against institutional resistance. Because at its core, Harut and Marut do what the best religious narratives do. They don't comfort, they warn. They take your certainty about your own goodness and ask, what if you're wrong? What if the circumstances that make you judge others are the only things keeping you from being them? In A Well in Babylon, if the stories are true, two beings hang suspended between heaven and earth. They're no longer quite angels. They're not quite human. They exist in the space between categories, teaching knowledge they wish they'd never learned, warning seekers away from paths they themselves walked. Every person who comes to them seeking power hears the same words. We are only a trial. The knowledge is real. Magic works in this framework, not because it defies God, but because it's part of creation's fabric, woven in by the same hand that made stars and soil. But like all powerful knowledge, it can separate you from what matters most. It can make you forget that you're not the source of your own strength. The test isn't whether you can learn sorcery. The test is whether you'll remember, while wielding it, that you're human, that you're fallible, that the beings who taught you this started where you are, certain of their righteousness, and ended where they are, permanently earthbound, eternal teachers of a lesson they learned by failing it. Harut and Marut lost their bet with God, but in losing, they gave humanity something more valuable than their original obedience ever could have, proof that judgment is a trap, that certainty is dangerous, and that the only honest response to another's weakness is humility about your own. The angels hang in Babylon still, teaching and warning. And every person who says, I would never, without checking their certainty, walks toward the same well, ready to take the same test, convinced, like the angels were, that they'll be the exception. They never are.